I'm sitting on the hill and I'm meditating. I hear let go. Felt my heart rate slow down to a point where it was like my last heartbeat. I closed each one of my chakras. I pushed myself up and I popped out of my crown. And then I'm in the void. I had no body. My voice was the same, so I was able to hear my consciousness. I was this expansion. I basically followed the voice. It said, let go. And I was there. I was just floating in this sea of blackness. It's like a womb. It's just endless, but really comforting. I was being held. But then I remember starting to ask some questions like, can I go home now? And the presence said, yes, you can come home. You have accomplished enough. My near-death experience happened in 2021 in April. I had already been on the spiritual path. I had my spiritual awakening in 2006, mostly in 2007. So that was the big start of my awakening and the path. And just the walk of who am I and why am I here and what is my purpose and why is my body in so much pain constantly. So all of these things started happening in 2006 and 7. So I delved into spirituality and the metaphysics, and some of the things that I had found was different from when, I grew up in a Roman Catholic church. And I started to just expand my awareness of things, and things started to come in synchronicities, and I was like, what is happening? So as I was going through the spiritual paths, 2006, 7, 8, I started to use my music for sound and healing because I needed it so desperately. So at that point, I thought I was on my path. I was just every day devotionally waking up and, praying, how can I serve? How can I be an instrument here? And this was about 2010. Then I had some more life crises. And then it was for me, the spiritual path has been an ongoing walk of peeling off layers. So again, 2012, I had another big event and I was like, what is happening? But each time I had these events or challenges, they've allowed me to amplify my own gifts that I already had and just bring in more energy and be more sensitive and more open-hearted and compassionate. And when I thought I couldn't go through any more is when when the near-death experience happened. So it was April, and at that time, I had a partner who was so incredibly devotional to me and I him. And it was like a love from another place that I didn't even think existed, but I was having this, and it was a spiritual love, mental, physical, it was everything. And I found him one day that he died, and I believe, like looking back, at that time I had no idea. I went to complete shock, grief, everything that you could imagine. I believe I went into soul shock, and I had been through so much before, so this trauma was something very, very, very different. And it affected my heart in a way where it felt like my heart was just not only just ripped open in grief and broken and shattered, but it was like part of my soul was literally cut off as well. Something was like I was decapitated. Some part of me was cut. And I had this excruciating pain in my heart. Now, I've had panic attacks before, in my 20s. I've dealt with those. And it wasn't that. It was very different. And there were days I would wake up just in grief. And if anybody has dealt with deep, deep grief, it is just a feeling that it is like it's a sacred walk, but it is so hard. And then one day I had dropped off my kids at school. It was about 3 weeks after he had passed. I had said, I need to deal with this heart, this pain. And it was different than the grief pain. I was able, because I'm an empath, I felt the difference. And it wasn't something I wanted to call and rush to the hospital. It wasn't that. It was just this deep, it was this deep pain. So I remember sitting on the hill in the back of my home. It was moss, and it was actually kind of a nice spring day. For some reason, I kept on hearing in my head, let go. And also at this time, I was also hearing my partner on the other side, and he said, he kept saying, I have not abandoned you. I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still here. So I had this paradox going on. I had this deep human experience of grief and earth-shattering pain, of suffering. And then at the same time, I was hearing him in my head saying, I'm right here. I haven't gone anywhere. I was trying to to merge the two, but the human suffering part of me just it overtook the metaphysical knowing part. So I already knew that we go on. I didn't need any convincing. I was always very devotional to Jesus and the path and the walk of Christ and Christ consciousness, even as a young child. But this was a little like this was different. This was a huge challenge for me. So as I'm sitting on the hill and I'm connecting and I'm meditating, again I hear let go. And I said, okay, I'm like, okay, I'll just let go. And I've been a meditator for 20 years at this point. So meditation wasn't foreign and I didn't know what was happening, but I knew something was happening. And I knew for some reason, intuitively, I knew I had to go through this. I didn't want to, but I knew. And so I felt my heart again, this rapid heartbeat. It wasn't panic. It was just such rapidity of my heart. And so I brought myself inside. I laid down because I was exhausted and tired. I hadn't really slept. I hadn't eaten. And this heartbeat was going so fast and it was like going to beat out of my chest. I was like, oh, I'm having a heart attack. Like I could have a heart attack. I was not even really thinking, but I kind of knew and I just let go. So what I did was, as I was in bed, I was listening to the ducks across the street because there's a farm. And I was allowing myself to just relax and relax, like, focus on my breathing, pranayama, focus on my heart rate. And so I could just slow down and just rest. And interestingly enough, as I was doing that, I felt my heart rate slow down to a point where at the same time the duck made a last quack, it was like a tunnel, like an audio, like, when you have tunnel vision, it goes like this. It was that audio wise because my eyes were closed. And it was like my last heartbeat. And I was still in my body. But it's taking me a long time to explain this more than, it happened really quickly. I knew instinctively to push up my energy, close my root, and push up my consciousness or my energy. I closed each one of my chakras. I pushed myself up and I went out. I popped, I spiraled, my energy spiraled. And I popped out of my crown because I heard a big pop. And then I'm in the void. And I had no body. My voice was the same. So I was able to hear my consciousness. I was this expansion. And I remember just going, because there was nothing there and my soul needed to be there. I knew it. I knew it needed to be there. I basically followed the voice that said, let go. And I was there. And I was just floating in this sea of blackness, black above, black below, black before. The whole thing was black. And it had like us, I think other near-death, I don't watch them a lot, but I watched a few where it feels like something, this void feels like a velvety substance. Like, so it's like a womb. I would compare it to a mother's womb as it's just endless, but really comforting. And I was being held. And then so I just sat there. I just didn't think. I just was. But then I remember starting to ask some questions like, can I go home now? And the voice, the presence, I would call it God because I've heard it throughout my life. And the presence said, yes, you can come home. You have accomplished enough. But then I started to say, who's going to find my body? I had all these questions, and then the answers were immediately answered in my head before the questions were even over. And so it was a telepathic communication with this voice. And then I talked about the suffering of my heart, and it was just so much I couldn't bear anymore because I had already gone through a lot leading up to this particular NDE. And so basically the voice did say, the presence, God did say, you are needed down there. You have more, you could do more work. You would be more, it was very, very fast. The information was so fast. You could go home. Everything is your choice. It's all your choice, but you have more work to do. You have, your children, which I knew, and they were the ones that were tethering me to earth. And so I said, I will go back, but you have to do something to my heart. I'm not going back with this. Dealing with the grief is one thing, but this pain of feeling like I have been amputated. So it said, I felt like in my right side, even though I didn't have a body, but it was like my right side of me was rumbling this deep growling, rumbling thunder. And then immediately I looked to my left, which was eternal blackness, but it was a flat plane of light that was coming at the same time as the rumbling. So it was kind of like thunder lightning. It was like masculine and feminine. I felt like I was in a feminine place, though, because of the feminine place of creation. So all of this happened. I don't know that I didn't feel time. And so it went right, this plane of light went right through me. And I felt like my consciousness jumped. So I knew it did something. I don't know what it did. I'll be honest, I don't know what it did. It felt like it cut something, or maybe a part of my soul went back and then the rest of me stayed here. And then I felt myself falling. And then there was a lot of information that I was getting at that time. Some of it came later that I was able to understand, but it was like I was falling through, I guess, a tube, because I was seeing things, I would say, vertically, like vertical light, falling so fast, it just felt instantaneous. And then I was back in my body because I heard the duck, and I was like, oh, okay, what just happened? It took me a while to get back. It took me weeks to be really fully back embodied. I came back, and part of me was even more sad because I was like, oh, I missed my exit point. But I knew I had to be back here. And I immediately, after a few hours of sitting in this and laying, like, what happened, I called my kids because they were at their dad's, and I'm like, I need to hug you and hold you. And it was weird because I usually feel them because I'm an empath, clairsentient, and I just had a hard time feeling them because I was disembodied. So a lot of it was making sense. When I was falling, one of the words, or one of the sentences that the God had said, or the presence, or however you want to explain source, it was that you will fall in love again. And it showed me a glimpse of the person, and like so fast, but I was so not there. That was not even what that was not what I was wanted or anything. I did remember that in the back of my head at some point. I did know intuitively that was specifically made for me. Like, I didn't need to go into the angelic realms because I already know that they exist. I didn't need to go and visit a grandmother who died because I can feel her, So that, I think every one of our near-death experiences, whoever have had one, is specifically made for what we need at that time. And most of them has to do with trauma. There's this connection through all of them. And I would say like 95% is a traumatic experience, which pulls us out of our body. So that was the near-death experience.
I love it. And I also love how you pointed out that often enough, it's because of our own traumas that we get to experience the things we experience in near death, because that's exactly what I hear time and time again. And it feels like the experience is very much tailored to the person, to their beliefs, and it's very often in line with the lessons that person still needs to learn.
Absolutely. 100%.
So tell me about your spiritual awakening and how that has changed, if at all, the work that you do around energy and sound healing. Did you do that before? Were you interested in it?
I was born in a very musical family. So I started playing classical music when I was 5, family of singers, violin players. So we were very, very musical. So sound and music has been a part of my genetics since I was young. But I never, ever thought to, I was a music teacher. I taught about 20,000 students in my career. So music has always been something that has been prominent. But it wasn't till I got really sick in that 2006-7 year after giving birth to my daughter, I got really, really sick. I had an emergency C-section. A lot of viruses and infections came up, and then I got bit by a tick, and I didn't know it. So I had Lyme or ehrlichiosis. I had all of so many things. So that, again, as I mentioned before, that led me on this path of like, just why? Like, why am I experiencing this? And I've always been a questioner of why, but why? I would ask my dad, but why, Dad? But why? I knew there were deeper meanings in everything. So I did start the search, and as I was healing, I went to so many doctors, and, some of the people said it was in my head and I was questioning my own reality. But meanwhile, I was in really dire pain. I just had to take a leap of faith that I had to go through this, and there was something it was telling me. So I had to deal with things in my life that I didn't want to see, which was part of why I was in pain. It was just allowing me to see all of these pieces of me that I had either pushed down or just neglected or rejected. And again, that was part of the process. And then I don't know how I remember. I had gone to a library and I heard it was for Tibetan singing bowls. It was back in 2008 and it was just a small tiny library, and I lay down and I hear these bells. I hear these gorgeous sounding bells, and I just was like, oh my goodness, that's what I know. I remember that sound. I don't know from where, I don't know why. And then I started to get training in Tibetan singing bowls, and I started to incorporate that into my own music. So I started to write music again. I had put my own music aside for 10 years because I allowed other people to make me feel like I was unworthy. That was my fault. So I didn't believe in myself. I allowed others to make me feel just not good enough, all of these things. And that was also part of my healing journey. So I had to know as I'm going through this, I had to honor these pieces of me that were so suppressed and so rejected. And so I started using sound in a way to honor those pieces. And once I started doing that, writing my own music, using this different kind of technique, I started to actually heal from the inside out instead of being on medicine. I let the medicine ended up going. Sometimes we do need medicine, and sometimes we need really to see what's underneath. And I believe it's all has to do with the spiritual disconnect of us, of the human character to the soul. So I started writing my albums in 2010, and it just kept on growing and growing and growing. But after my near-death experience, I started to feel like, because I was able to connect to my partner on the other side at that point, and I was already a medium because when I was younger, I would see these little beings around my bed, and by the time I was in fourth grade, I was like, okay, no more. I pushed that away. And so I already knew I had abilities. Again, they were all I just suppressed them because nobody was talking about them. And I just, at that time in the 80s or the 90s, this was just not as prevalent and as it is now. So I am so excited that people are awakening and it is more common, and you don't have to feel like you have to hide and be ashamed. And, if there are any young audience members, I honor you. So keep going. You are not alone. The music started to, after the near-death experience, I was able to connect to the end, like really quickly to the angelic realm. I was working with archangels. I was like, whoa, I was able to identify frequency because I'm a musician, and it felt to me like mathematical equations that I was able to interpret. So my brain became a more sensitive or precise receiver of energy.
And funnily enough, I've heard that before. So we've had Mark Patterson on the show, and he was also talking about, how a sound is almost like mathematics and geometry and the shapes. And it was, I think, the first time for me hearing that, but it makes so much sense now after diving a bit deeper into that.
Yes, because we are perceiving mathematics. So this, in my humble experience and, insight or knowing, for lack of a better word, if this resonates, take it. If not, don't. But I perceive that this reality that we are living is a matrix. It is not where we're from. We're all from another place, another space, another time. And in order to perceive this matrix, which is all numerical based, because it's all energy, it's all frequency, we all vibrate at a different frequency. We all vibrate at a different level. The chair vibrates, the piano vibrates, everything vibrates. And it has a particular mathematical equation that equates to how we perceive it with the light in our pineal gland. So it is like a hologram in a way. My ability I was able to see the energy in a different way. I was always able to see energy if I could relax my eyes. I could see the waves, but this was different. This was like, okay, bing, turn to a radio, bing, turn to another one. Ding, where do I want to go now? And so I was able to travel up to see him and go into these crystal palaces in my it's all inside. It's not out there. So anyone that's telling you anything is out there, don't believe them. The game is in here. Everything is in. And that's how we connect to God. It's in. It's not out there.
I love it. And I also want to circle back to something you said earlier that really stuck with me, which was, I let them make me feel unworthy. And I think in just such a simple sentence, what you've said is not, it's somebody else's fault that I'm feeling unworthy. It's somebody else's fault that they're making me feel not good enough. but somehow I'm not feeling well, and somebody else's attitude or actions or words are triggering this not being enoughness, if that's not a word, in me. And I think that just in very few words, it just shows how far you've come. And of course, I didn't know you before that spiritual awakening, but it sounds to me like you're somebody who's just taking ownership of everything, of her traumas, of the things that she needs to improve. And I think that's such a powerful thing, because if I think of the people that I meet in daily life, it's very often that victim mentality, which just keeps us stuck. So it's very much, they're doing this to me. They're making me feel not good enough. They're choosing to see me that way. But it's only true if you let it be true. Nobody can make you feel unworthy if you don't feel unworthy.
And it's so hard not to, it is so hard because the part of us that is the human part of us needs to experience that because it's part of the grand play. It's part of the experience of being a human. Like, I believe everything is a mirror of us. Everything is a reflection of how we feel inside. And there are people that challenge the fork out of us. Like, and if we look at that, they could be our biggest gifts in a way, even though it doesn't feel like it, but they're challenging us to see, well, where can you grow and how can you overcome this belief that isn't true? This isn't true. You aren't unworthy. We are all sons and daughters of God. There is no one that is there's no one that is more loved than us. Each one is loved the same way. And we see in our reality where we have to grow. It's just, if you look at your reality and you see the places that are, you don't like or you want to change, that's where you have to grow on the inside, because the reality is a reflection of how we feel. It's hard.
Absolutely.
It is the path.
My own change came from changing from somebody is making me feel in a certain way to, ooh, I'm noticing that these actions are triggering these feelings in me. And I think just by wording it in a different way, it sort of makes me seem like a bystander that's detached and that's observing the emotions that are happening.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've recently went through was a similar challenge, but I've decided I just needed a break from that person because he was bringing out feelings in me of unworthiness, of not being good enough, of trying to be somebody else who maybe would be good enough. And I thought, well, that's not really who I want to be, and that's not something that I want to be chasing. So if those feelings bubble up for me, then maybe I just need to take a step back and come back to that relationship when I'm feeling a bit more comfortable with myself and when I'm able to take that. And I think it's just something that I've been stuck in for so many years. But it's slowly starting to change. And I think for me, the biggest shift was just changing my wording and the way I thought about it. And it's just unbelievable how these simple tweaks can have such a big impact.
Our words are very powerful. The voice, inside and out, is what creates our reality. So when we misspeak against, we're misspeaking against ourselves. Therefore, we're going to have more things that prove that belief. We have the divine mouthpiece right here. It's all, we already have it. And we must learn as a new earth how to use this beautiful instrument. And once, one of my favorite, I have so many favorite quotes, but one of my favorite impactful ones, during once I started to liberate myself, free myself from the matrix, all these people's thinking of me, all of this stuff, once you get out and you see the propaganda, you're not good enough, buy this, blah, 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 all of this stuff, even people's belief of that, you realize, and you get enough back and you get into the space of being connected to who you truly are, you realize with great freedom, here's the quote, comes great responsibility. Because if we knew how powerful we were, we would never talk unkindly about ourselves. We would never. We wouldn't really talk unkindly about somebody else because they're a reflection of us. They're also children of God. I don't know how old you are, but we continue to peel off these layers, and when you think you got it, there's another layer. But the more, it's really about falling in love with the process. I think the process is hard. And when you realize it's a process, and in a year from now, you're going to be different, and you're going to be different again, and you're going to be different again. It's understanding the process of basically just continuing to take off the garbs that are not us. And you're going to be great. Good job.
Thank you. It is a work in progress, so we're still chipping away at it. But that's exactly as it should be. It's, I think, again, one of the biggest changes that I always needed to see the goal in front of me, and I needed to know where the deadline was, the end goal, when will it be reached. And I stopped actually doing that and just thinking, well, I'm just going to make progress towards it. I'm just going to do one small thing that's maybe a change in the right direction, and then I'll just take it from there.
It's all in God's time, not our time.
Exactly. So you mentioned being free from the matrix, disconnecting from everybody else's opinion of you. And one thing that strikes me is that you're an artist. And we know that artists and creative people, they're particularly susceptible, right, to the opinions of others, to criticism, because art comes in different shapes and forms, and not everybody will understand certain shapes and forms. So there's always more criticism in this field than anywhere else. So would you mind sharing a bit about your process of how you've managed to detach from those opinions, and how has it impacted your creative process?
Ooh, that is a good question. I would say I found, for me, in the beginning of my path in the art field, or the music field, because I had gone to college, I had a full scholarship. There was a lot of focus on, you had to do concerts and recitals, and you were graded, and it was just constant outside, it's extrinsic motivation, and everything was outside, outside, outside. And then I became a teacher of students in a public school of music, and I started to see the system the way it was. I didn't, this was in my 20s, so I didn't have my spiritual awakening yet, but I started to see how these children were boxed in a box. And I was like, not on my watch. So, I even, this was before my spiritual awakening, I started to see how the matrix, especially in institution, is in education, and it's not the teacher's fault. So I am honoring teachers. You go into the schools and you teach because you love what you do. It's the system that tries to control the mass. So I started to see this, and yes, there we have to, for any sport or for anything that you want to master, we have to master certain skills, right? It's just it's part of the discipline. But there was a part where I was like, whoa, no wonder why I felt so limited in my own. I had to fit here and I had to fit here. And I was like, yeah, I can't fit. No. I knew the power of my soul, but not yet, not to the extent until, a decade later. But this is what I will say to your audience. If you're an artist or a singer or a musician or a composer, the more you deeply connect to who you truly are, which is source energy, you connect to that, you make that your dominant vibration and your dominant frequency, nothing outside you can take you down. You just become connected at all time to truth. And anything underneath that, or anything that attacks you, you won't. It's resonance. It's the same. It's not that. It's kind of simple. It's just frequency. So if you're resonating in an empowered way, where you're connected to God, which is truth, you're connected to your path, right? And somebody wants to come and, your dominant frequency is here, and the dominant is the stronger one. It won't really register, because you're higher than it. It'll still impact if you still have self-doubt, and if you still have unworthiness, and if that's a trigger and it's still in you, then it will come out. But if you have worked through the doubt, the self, all of the states of consciousness that are in the Bible, by the way, the Bible is written as a story of Jesus and the walk, and just, one of the greatest ascended masters of the earth. However, it has so much in there as a teaching component for us. So each character is a state of consciousness. So doubting Thomas is the doubt that we all carry. And so, to go back to your original question, if you work through your doubt, So you keep on doing your art. You keep on doing your art. What is the opposite, or what is the medicine for doubt? Would be self-acceptance, right? Confidence. Once you get confident enough, the doubt goes away, right? And so anybody that says something to you and makes you doubt, if your dominant vibration is here, it doesn't penetrate.
But it raises another one, because I've never heard of the Bible having different layers of consciousness. The thing that you've just mentioned, about doubting Thomas, it really resonates. So would you mind going a bit deeper into that interpretation of the Bible?
Well, I don't know exactly, but each character. So let's use Mary Magdalene, for example. What to you is Mary Magdalene? What is she carrying? Rejection. That's the big one, because she was rejected from society. So that would be a state of consciousness where we have ostracized ourselves, or somebody else has ostracized us from society. Dante, we're going to get to this at the end when you ask me what thing I've worked on. But in Dante's Inferno, it's similar. It's very similar. Talks about the layers of hell. So if you can look, there are layers of hell in the Bible. Pontius Pilate, the judgment, the judgment. So that's another layer, state of consciousness. Everything is a state. So if you can take the story and you can see what the players are, the characters are holding states of consciousness. Once you go through the states of consciousness, you become like Christ. And sometimes it takes lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes. And sometimes I don't know. I don't think you can get it in one lifetime personally. This game is way too hard. And there's so many aspects, Let's do another character. Oh, they're just every character. If you read it, what are they representing? A lot of judgment in that Bible.
I mean, somehow it just feels, now that you're saying that, it feels like something that has been hiding in plain sight. So it seems so obvious that you've said it. And I was like, yeah, I mean, of course, there's these characters, right? It resonates so deeply, but somehow I've never thought of it that way. What I will say is I will go back to the Bible for sure, and I'll try to read it by looking at what are the lessons we can learn from there. And it also makes sense to me that, if they're representing, for instance, rejection and judgment, and those are the things that we deal with on a daily basis as well, right? As humans, we get faced with rejection, we get faced with doubt, uncertainty.
Abandonment is another one. There's a lot of characters that deal with abandonment. Even Jesus said, "Why have you abandoned me?" I mean, as he's on the cross, he's saying that, and that represents all of us. We deal in my opinion, we deal as humans with two major wounds that we all have. Sometimes they're equal, sometimes they're more. Abandonment and rejection. Those two are the deep, and then there's shame around that. And they're very low, but the abandonment and the rejection is just us feeling like we have been abandoned from the Garden of Eden, feeling like we have been abandoned from God. We haven't. We've just taken on a character that has had to be veiled so that we remember we're never abandoned and we're not rejected. That when we see the abandonment, we can't abandon ourselves and we can't reject ourselves. So sometimes we, as souls here, characters, we continue with the same relationship over and over, just with a different person, but the same wound. There's the rejection wound again, and there it is again, and until we don't reject the aspects of ourselves that need to be loved and accepted.
Yeah, that's so deep. And I think often enough, the more we carry these wounds, the more we connect with people and look for those people that just hurt us deeper into those wounds, which is so unfortunate. And it feels, I think, when you say it like this, very detached and very generally, it sounds like such a silly thing to say and so stupid if you're doing it. But often enough, like, this is so intrinsic that you don't even realize what you're doing.
Well, we're playing an immersive game. It's like, what is that game? Jumanji? It's a full immersive experience. Because if we're not feeling all the feels and we're not feeling the experience, then we don't get it. We're in heaven, in the spirit world, and on the other side is all love all of the time. So there's no challenge. It takes us much longer to learn forgiveness in the afterlife. Probably, I don't know, there's no time, but probably eons. Where here we have to have somebody to forgive, and it's right there. Exactly. We learn fast. We learn faster on Earth. So kudos to the Earthlings.
So let's go back to using sound as healing, because that's something that all of us here are really interested in. And we've talked about sound in a previous interview, and everybody just had so many questions about it. How do you use sound and music to facilitate healing as well as conscious awakening in your sessions? And if you could also give some takeaways to the audience for somebody that's maybe new to this and wants to know what the best first steps are to take, what would you advise them to do?
For my own sessions, I don't do many private ones. I used to, but I love groups. I love working with groups more. Again, I'm a choir teacher, so mass is, I just resonate with that. So for me, I use sound. Every group is different. Every need of the group is different. So because I'm a channel and an empath, and my clairsentience amplified after the NDE. So I can feel into the energetic frequencies of people and where they're imbalanced. And I try to bring balance in through my voice. A lot of it is through my voice. And, I do use Tibetan singing bowls because I find that Tibetan singing bowls, specifically not crystal Tibetan, crystals are pretty, but they're very, very different. So the Tibetan singing bowls work specifically with our brain waves to bring them down to a theta brainwave state. And that's the state where we are more susceptible to being programmed in a bad way, but also a very good way. So we can get into that deep, the subconscious mind, because I am also a past life regression therapist and hypnotherapist. So I kind of incorporate all of this into my work, the music, the sound, the hypnosis, and it's really like reprogramming everybody's program at one time. And so I assess, so say I have a group of 30 people. I will assess where they are, like what is the top 5 limiting beliefs of what they have. Where are they stuck? Are we dealing with mostly rejection? Are we dealing with mostly abandonment? Is it self-love deficit? What is it? And then I bring them into a place of non-resistance, because if we're holding resistance, then we can't receive. We can't receive the love. We can't receive the energy. So it's really going into the divine feminine, which is the receiving. The divine masculine is giving. The divine feminine is receiving. And so bringing them into that space using particular sounds and frequencies that will remind them of who they are and connect them to the pieces that they need for the harmonics that they need to move, to be more connected to who they are. Because in the end, I'm not doing the healing. I'm just a channel. I'm just bringing through whatever the light or source wants me to bring in, and it's different. Sometimes it's a mantra, sometimes it's 5 mantras, sometimes it's light language or heart. For me, I don't do light language, I do heart language. I'm really heart centered. So when it comes through me, it's very heart centered, and it's a very emotive, because we are learning to become 6th sensory beings, clairsentient, clairaudient, clairvoyant, all of these clairs. And I help them to figure out how to do it themselves, because I don't want anybody dependent on me. No, that's a trap. That's a trap, an ego trap. So, and the path of Christ, if you look at what Jesus, he'll help people the first time. He'll help them. He'll heal them, he'll help them. And then he teaches them how to do it themselves so that they can teach others. It's the fisher of men. So they are not dependent upon him. He never wanted to be an idol. He was a teacher. He was a teacher, the greatest metaphysical teacher of all time. I mean, there are others, Yogananda. I mean, there are others. There are a lot of yogis. But I don't know. The Bible, that's the story, man. So this is how I would, so for beginners, I have a couple of beginner courses on my own website, just for really beginners. And it's really working with the voice, because I love all instruments. I'm a musician, but there's something about the voice that can quickly move you from a depressed state to a state of consciousness more connected and more aligned to truth. So I would say that first, the easiest way would be just put on a song that you like and that makes you happy, because again, it's all frequency and it's all vibration. So if you put yourself in a state of joy, gratitude and joy, so put on a piece of music and dance. That's one. Or move, just move, sing. Then or if you can find a mantra. So a mantra is the man is mind and a tra This means sound. So mantra is a sound that trains the mind. So if you are continuously doing the mantra, your whole body becomes that mantra. So your instrument becomes whatever that mantra is. People need to move towards where they feel open and receptive instead of closed.
Fair enough. No, I think that's definitely good. Do you have any specific techniques that we should be looking out for, or instruments?
The first thing I would say, anybody can do it with no instruments, really. You could hum. Humming is a way that, especially if you hum, and anybody can do it. It doesn't matter what kind of voice you have. If you vibrate here, it's like a kazoo. You feel like a kazoo. And it's very grounding right away. So what I'm seeing is what's happening in the earth. I don't throw myself in it. I kind of observe it from a 5-dimensional place, and I can see. But a lot of people are getting up with all the energies outside, what's happening with the moon, all these things, and it's ungrounding them. So humming specifically, or oming, or humming, even amen. If you amen, it's the hum is there, the sound is there. The first thing is sound. I would say that is probably the most effective form of sound healing. You can go by singing bowls and but it's you already have it, and it's free.
Perfect. So I hope that everybody will start using that. At least, they need to start where they're at, which I think is the most important part. And the more you resonate with it and connect with it, the more you can go deeper into something. But I love breaking down big things into smaller steps so that people actually leave with actionable bits and pieces of, I'm going to hum for 5 minutes a day, or I'm just going to listen to Aurelia's music, for instance, or I'm going to do a group session. Because I think it's those small things that you can add to your agenda that make it manageable and that make sure that you're actually going to follow through with it, as opposed to saying, well, I need to know everything there is to know about sound, and then I'll know what to do next.
That's like playing a upper level soccer game when you still haven't learned to kick the ball. It's just too much. And not everything resonates for everyone. And I'm a musician, and I don't even do all the sound healing instruments. No, it's like not mastering one thing. And when we master one thing or two things, we become more confident, and it helps us profoundly. So
Absolutely.
I would say to your audience, if you meditate out there, just if you can do perfect 3 to 5 minutes of humming before you meditate, you will amplify your meditation. You'll go deeper because you've just sounded, and you'll relax your nervous system, and do that for 2 weeks, and then see how you feel.
Awesome. I'm going to try that myself as well. So let's talk about the changes in your abilities, because you mentioned before and after your NDE, your senses started amplifying. And I know there's a story there about how your partner has helped you master those abilities. So would you mind sharing more about how that changed for you?
Gosh, a year ago I would have been sobbing. I might start crying. He gave me the hardest and biggest gift ever, knowing that there is no death, knowing that we are always connected there, knowing that I can call upon him at any time. Even then, I don't need it as much because I know he's always there, and a new person has come into my life. So I honor him. And it's the one that actually came. It was the snapshot that actually came in my NDE, which was mind blowing. It's really about honing in on its frequency. I keep saying it's one word, it's frequency. So when we realize that we are frequency beings, so your soul resonates at a soul, like just a frequency, mine does. And so when me and you are together, we create a harmonic, right? So talking to me feels different than talking to somebody else, right? So that's our soul harmonic. So what I did notice was, and I started to put this together, when I started to call him in, I would just feel what it felt like between him and I. That's the radio dial. And then he'd come right in. I would feel it on the inside. I was like, oh, you're here. I would start asking questions. He would give me answers. And I'm not clairaudience. Ironically, as a musician, I'm not clairaudient. That's not my, it's clairsentient. So I'm a I'm emotive, I'm a feeler. So the information would come more in the feeling part of me. I started to do it with him, and then I started to do it with other, like the Ascended Masters, what it felt like. It would be a different frequency. So I started to hone in. I'm like, oh, what does this one feel like? What does this one feel like? Oh, this one feels like this. I worked a lot with Archangel Gabriel and Michael and Raphael specifically, and they were very different frequencies. And I was able to kind of surrender my body like a channel does, but put the frequency in and sing and vibrate at that particular frequency. So if it was Gabriel, I would sing them from that perspective or from that harmonic. And I just was practicing that for a year. So I remember making a decision. I'm like, okay, if I'm going to stay on Earth, I am going to get good at this, and I am going to step into the next part of my journey, because this wasn't accidental. I think that this was planned, pre-planned before our birth. I was supposed to meet him. I had so many signs that this particular man was my next partner for whatever reasons, and for this next part of my path. So hardest journey, part of my journey, but the greatest gift.
And you've mentioned earlier that you've done work with Archangel Gabriel and other angels as well. How can I imagine working together with an angel? Because that sounds new to me.
Do you want it?
If I want to do it myself?
Yeah, as long as you want it. You can do anything. Nothing is off limits. Only you limit yourself.
Okay, so that's not necessarily something that's connected to your abilities, but is it something that everybody can access?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Everyone can access it. We all have these abilities. I would say if you want to work with a particular angel, this goes for anybody, you and anybody that's listening, I would say I would do an assessment of the self first. And what are your gifts? Are they more, can you hear? There's even a scent, there's a scent clairsalience or something like that. I forgot what the name is, but it's when you can smell. Sometimes people have, it's actually the least common clair, but it's like if you're in a dream, you're starting to wake up and all of a sudden you smell like a flower from your grandmother that passed liked, or cough, something that is making your heightened sense smell. So I would look at ourselves, your audience, and see which sense is your most powerful. So if it's clairvoyant and you see images, then that would be what you would work with. For me, again, I could speak from me because clairsentience is my strongest one. That's why I can feel. So what do you think your strongest one is? I think you're a feeler.
I was going to say that, yeah, from the moment you've said clairsentient, I didn't know that word, but to be honest, it does so much for me when I touch a person or when I hug them. So for instance, hugging a person, like, it's just an experience, and it's much stronger than anything else for me. So just kissing on the cheek, for instance, when you say goodbye, like, yeah, that's just hello or goodbye. It does nothing. As opposed to hugging them, like, I want to say I feel their energy. I don't know to what extent, but I think I do. And what I also know that I feel is I can feel if somebody is a good person or a bad person for me. And usually I'm right.
I was thinking, especially given the situation of the relationship that you were speaking of before, you're clairsentient. You're an empath. So if we are a lot of women are empaths. Empathic can just feel. So that's the clairsentient gift. And sometimes we have to learn what is our feelings and what is somebody else, and how do we decipher which one it is. And that took me a long time, because as a young child, I was feeling everything all the time. I was feeling the good, the bad. I couldn't, even now I have to watch big crowds because I can feel it. I can protect myself, but sometimes I just rather stay in solitude for a little while. But if you want to connect to a certain frequency, whatever it is, an angel, and if your gift is clairsentience, you're going to get into your body. You're going to feel what it feels like. Like, you're going to imagine, what does Archangel Michael feel like? What are his skill sets? He is the warrior. He has the sword. What does Raphael feel like? So understand what they are first, right? Understand yourself first, and then through your meditations, get yourself into a nice non-resistant place, and then call upon them and see how you could feel a subtle shift in your body. It'll start subtly, at first, and then the more that you practice, the more stronger it'll get.
And I think a lot of people in the audience will try that for sure.
That is the biggest thing that I think if I was going to strip everything down in my life, it was really about facing every one of my fears. And so when you decide to do that, it takes a lot of courage, and then then it can't be over you anymore. You faced it and you've overcome.
Why do you think fear is one of the biggest things that can change us and overcoming our fears particularly?
Because fear, in my opinion, carries so much emotion, and emotion is energy. People know this. There are people that know this. This isn't your first rodeo on the earth, so you've been here. And a lot of people that are here now on this earth, we have what, 8 billion people. There are people that know that to keep souls or humans in check, subordinate, because we're playing a game with a lot of people. We're not just solo playing. There's a lot of the cast of characters is large. So in order for people to have control over a large amount of people, they put them in fear. Fear is a very, very, very strong emotion. So when you say, for example, and I'm going to simplify this, say you have 100% every day, you wake up with 100% of energy, right? If you're devoting 80% of that energy to fear, you're exhausted. And you're not going to get your power. You're not going to get your spiritual power, because true spiritual power, true God power, does not live in fear. It's love, liberation, love. There is no fear. So that is why this game or this immersive experience is a lot of fear in it, because once we overcome it, we experience it and we don't need it again. And when you overcome chunks of fear, you get more spiritual power. You get courage. You get all of these things. So you take 80% off and you knock 10% off of fear of then you get 10% of something else. That's better, so it strengthens your soul.
I love that. And I hope that everybody would have the power to just face maybe it's one of the small fears to start with, but taking just baby steps towards conquering that. And I have my own list of things that I have to work through for sure. There's a big one for this year that's planned. I don't know if fix it, but I will say that I will take steps to address it for sure. And it's something that would bring me panic attacks whenever it would happen. And the thing that you've just said, with it devoids you of energy, it's exactly what I feel. I feel like the moment this happens, I'm just in fight or flight. Everything feels unsafe. And I know it's all in my head because it's not real, but it just feels like I'm in the most unsafe place and I just need to get out. And my energy is just focused on being far, far away from wherever that place is. And it's a terrible place to be in. So I've tried therapies in the past and they haven't been successful, not long term, but I will definitely try others until I find a solution for it.
You will. Keep going. Keep going. Sometimes it takes a lot of different times and a lot of different people to work with, and you will find it. If you really want to do it, you will. The answers will present themselves to you.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what I believe as well. I believe fear is the opposite of love. And I think the more we try to connect with love, I'm not quite sure how to do it when I'm in the space of fear, but I know that it's just the opposite of it and it's not the way it's meant to be. So I know that if I keep chipping away at it, it will be better. So I wanted to move through the questions a bit quicker because we don't have much time left. But I think a topic that you have a lot to say on would be the advice that you would give people that are dealing with grief, with hopelessness, with depression, loss as well. So if you could give any advice to a large group of people dealing with hopelessness, what would you say?
Hopelessness. That's a tough one. We, as divine children of God, are not supposed to be hopeless. So if we can move hopelessness to a different vibration, we could deal with that better. So sadness, maybe. So if we could deal with sadness as an extent of hopelessness, then we could honor the part of us that is sad and grieving. So is there a part of you that is grieving? Then that needs to be honored by feeling into it. It's funny, the scariest part for me, honestly, I have been through so much. I've been on court stands for being a witch and all these things, a conspiracy theorist. I've been dragged through court for the most crazy things. And that was scary for me. I have been through the death of my partner. I have been through a divorce. All of these things, illness, really fatal illness. But one of the scariest things that I've had to face has been my own feelings, because they feel so daunting and big. And if you are an empath, which I have a feeling you have many empaths in your audience, and I love working with empaths. I created my program to work with for empaths to help heal them and to help identify where we need more support. The answer to your question is we can't bypass anything. Rumi, who I love, Rumi, the Persian poet, he says the cure for the pain is in the pain. So we must allow ourselves to feel it. We don't have to drown there and stay there forever. But if we honor that part, so say it is grief. I gave myself a year to grieve, and I didn't, if I wanted to feel like crap that one day or a week or 3 weeks or whatever, I allowed myself to do that, because I knew if I didn't do that, it would come back again as, God forbid, breast cancer, because it was heart stuff for me. It's heart. I am kind of summing up everything, as we're all dealing with the heart right now. Earth is the heart plane. We have to learn to be in the heart, because when we open that heart space first, if we're hopeless and sad, for ourselves, and have compassion for the self, be with it. Listen to music that resonates and opens your heart. I mean, I do a lot of music with hearts. That's what I work with, the heart. I'm a bodhisattva. I work with the heart. We honor that part, and then when we feel like we've cried enough or we've exhausted that feeling enough, we find a frequency that's a little higher, so that we don't jump. We don't spiritually bypass the part of us, the human part of us that feels hopeless and that feels rejected, because we create our reality. So everybody is playing the same game here. How come some people are living their life, their best life, and then some people are like, it's his fault, it's her fault, da 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 da. We're playing the same game. So you have to decide you don't want to feel sad anymore. Sometimes it's what we're eating. I am a great advocate of eating really cleanly. Inflammation affects the brain. We are being in the United States, where it's a little different than where you are, but we are being constantly, our food is not of quality here. Everything has stuff in it. We take the same food from here and we look there, that you have 5 times the ingredients. So I would look at your food. If it's causing any inflammation, I would go on an anti-inflammatory diet, because that affects our brains. And I would just allow us to be where we are and not rush, because we have eternity. We never die. And if we skip over this lifetime, we're just going to have to do it again in another form.
I love that. And I think also the part where you said about eating cleanly, it resonates so deeply with me, because that's what I believe in as well. Incidentally, I've been to the US. I mean, I've been many times, but just a couple of months back with a friend, and it was his first time in New York. And what he noticed was everybody was carrying a cup or a piece of food on the street.
Oh,
Like, that was the first thing he noticed, was like, is everybody eating or drinking outside here? And it's so interesting, because whilst we were there, we also got into the habit, right, of like, oh, should we just pick up a coffee? Should we just pick up a donut? Or maybe you're feeling a bit peckish. But I think just being a bit more mindful of your food is a big thing. And I also want to say that for anybody that wants to go deeper into that, in one of our latest episodes with Eugene Braxton, we talked about fasting and about the importance of not eating to keep the body clean as well, and to make sure that it cleans itself. And that's not eating for sometimes a day, so 24 hours, but you can choose whatever frequency it is that best serves you, because you know your body best. And I was really impressed to know how much fasting can also help you spiritually, because I knew from a health perspective, right, there's so many benefits, and I'm such a big fan of it, and I do it every day, and once a week I do a 24-hour fast. But I didn't it feels so good, to be honest. I think everybody needs to do whatever feels good for them. But to me, it's definitely very helpful.
The longest fast I did was I did a 3-day dry fast. That was no water. That was insane. So by the time the 3rd day came, like the smell of food, but like everything was all the senses, our 5 senses, bothered me. I was like, oh, I could just fly away now. It made me too ethereal. Like I need to be, I can fly anytime, any place. I can, barely touch the ground. but I need to be in my body as part of my work. So I totally agree with fasting. It's so many benefits. It's an interesting
And
journey
that's,
because things will come up
yeah.
for you. Yeah, like emotional things. Why am I really eating? Am I really hungry because I'm tired? I find that my pattern has been I was hungry because I was tired and I wasn't allowing myself to rest. And being in a Western, it's like go, 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 go. And that was the beginning of my spiritual awakening because, yeah, I didn't allow myself what I needed.
Yeah, I think many of us do. And
Mhm.
what you said earlier, about feeling too ethereal after your 3-day fast, that's exactly what Eugene says. If you want to have out of body experiences, if you want to be closer to those other dimensions, the best way to get there is to clean your body best you can. So
Mhm.
you do that through fasting. Now,
Mhm.
I will put a disclaimer out there that this is not nutritional advice and you need to do what's best for your body. So be reasonable, but we do have a reasonable audience. But yeah, you can definitely start with a few hours. Try extending, the nighttime period, with maybe skip breakfast once, and see what happens.
Yeah, intermittent fasting is great too. Totally agree. Stay here. I eat. Yeah, I eat a lot of protein to just stay in my body.
Does protein help keeping you grounded?
For me, yes. I please don't be offended, but I follow the carnivore diet. I used to
Okay.
be vegetarian 3 times and it just didn't work. I do believe that everybody has a unique diet for them. Carnivore happens to work for me, or the lion diet. It's just food. It's just, it just gives me the nutrients I need and I don't have to take a lot of supplements and my mind is clear, I'm focused, got a lot of energy. So people have to find what is good for them and they'll know because they'll feel great. If you don't feel great, try
Exactly.
something different.
Yeah, exactly. I was vegetarian as well, vegan for a while, but I couldn't keep that up with traveling. I was traveling a lot for my work. And then I was vegetarian for, I think, it would have been 4 or 5 years. It was really difficult going back to meat because I wasn't when you get used to not eating meat, it
Hmm.
almost felt like a bit
Yeah,
weird
I
to
felt
touch
it.
it,
Hmm.
but it
It was
felt so much better.
that was me. I had a huge philosophical, war going on in my head. I didn't want to eat the animals. I didn't want to eat them, but my body needs it. It needs the meat for me. For me, not, everybody's different. So no judgment. You'll be in a bad state of consciousness. No judgment. But yeah, it's really interesting because everybody is so unique.
And that's what I often say, because we also talk to a lot of people, right, that are vegan and vegetarian. And I think there's no right way or wrong way about it. I think it just depends on what works for you. And I definitely used to be one of those vegans when I was a vegan that would just preach being vegan, and whatever issues anybody would have was like, see, it's because you're not a vegan. That's why this is happening to you. And
Mhm.
I'm definitely admitting to it, and I'm not proud of it now. But I think you just have to find what works for you. And there's no harm in trying, being vegan for a week or being carnivore for a week and just see what that does. I would, for one, start with taking off the most common allergens and try then reintroducing them to actually
Mhm.
see for yourself what your deficiencies are at. Just you do you and let everybody else live as well. That's the
Absolutely.
message we're sending here.
Non-judgment. Non-judgment.
Exactly. Aurelia, tell me, if people want to learn more about what you do, where can they find you?
Oh, Aureliaslight. So I'm Aureliaslight is my recording artist name, Aureliaslight.com. And I have 3 amazing projects that are in the process but are released. I would love to send your audience to watch this. It is Dante. It is Inferno to Paradise, Hell to Paradise, based on Dante's Inferno, and it's on PBS right now. And I'm the musical voice of Beatrice. So she guides Dante through the pits of hell, and the soundtrack is coming out this Friday, which is Good Friday, actually. It's an epic soundtrack. The music is healing, and there is a part that is a little darker, but it's really uplifting and gorgeous. So I would invite your audience to go check it out. It'll be streamed everywhere on all movie platforms soon. My academy, Aurelia's Light, Sound Healing Academy, and all my music streamed everywhere. And I have a YouTube channel where I read a lot and I talk about my story more, and I just kind of give tips, and it's lots of sound healing stuff and, my music. And yeah, and the Dante thing I recommend because it is on PBS and it can be streamed, I think, for this week again, just for free because it's everybody's story. again, it's the story of the path and what we have to go through in order to graduate from this earth plane and, face these parts of us that are afraid and that are in fear and that are disconnected from divine love, which is just love.